but that would be mild. That's mild and that's weird. That doesn't work at all. And then I thought about, well, bold and accidental leader development, but that's bald. And not that there's anything wrong with that, but it just doesn't, it's accidental. That doesn't work. And then I thought about mediocre and experienced leader development, but that's meld and that's weird. And then mediocre old leader development, but that's mold. And then I thought about what you suggested was perfect and intentional leader development, because that'd be piled. So I don't know which one you like, but that's not what we're doing today. This is whole and intentional leader development. This is WiLD, and this is a WiLD community. And I'm so grateful for all of you that are here. As we jump into this particular topic, you know, of course, like for some of you, it's like, where do you even begin? And so you got to start somewhere. And so I want to give you a few of my, like a couple of guardrails. This is maybe as much for me as for you, but a couple of guardrails to think about. Okay. So it's whole and intentional families. This is a topic that we've touched on in certain places, but we never kind of gone straight at this way. So let me give you some of my guardrails. First one, while there may be ideals that are important, every one of our reality is not quite the ideal. Okay, can I let that land with you for a second? I think that's a part of this community. There might be people who are like, oh, Rob, I'll tell you what the ideal is, and I live it. Like those people are, I don't know, you probably should go somewhere else. I don't know, that's a different, that is a webinar somewhere else. I don't know. That's not, but here's what I would expand that and say, what I'm gonna get personal. I hope I don't touch on some things that are sore spots, but it's kind of our reality. While it would be great if none of us ever got divorced, some of us did. While it would be great if there were couples who didn't struggle deeply while married, some of us do. If there was never a couple, some of us had that. If we were doing family in a way that wasn't our perfect picture, I promise you that you're not the only one. We have all experienced fragmentation, and we have, in some cases, we've caused it. In some cases, it's been brought upon us. And I would say in some cases, maybe in some of you would add categories, it just happened. And so I think, I hope that all of your experiences, if I didn't list what you would experience as your life around family, I would hope you just bring that to the conversation, because I'm not trying to leave anybody out. I'm just thinking about a few different pictures. And that's just the kind of, that's one lens on what family is. And I know there's multiple lenses. I would also suggest this as a guardrail for me. A friend of mine has said to me, who has walked closely with me in my own family and work life. He's in my strategic network of support. And he always reminds me, he says, Rob, it's more about seasons. And it's always, that has been a really important thing to remember, is that it is oftentimes about seasons, but we feel like it's final endings. You know what I mean? In a lot of cases. And I think that reminder from a dear friend of mine has been really, really important. Here's another thing, that we all aspire to wholeness within our somewhat fragmented realities. And I think here's what's kind of challenging. And that's one of the reasons this community and our conversation has existed, is that we believe we are more alone in those feelings than we are in reality. So what I'm saying to you is that I've talked to enough people to have a sense that, Rob, the things that you feel that make you feel isolated are not true. You are not the only person who feels that way. The reality is different than that, even though I may convince myself, because I just feel so alone, that it's just not true. And that we have way more in common than we realize when it comes to this. And maybe not everybody would, but I think people a part of this community, like that have been a part of this conversation, would probably agree with me. And I think the fourth thing is this, that we could be more intentional. I think we could. And so here's my opening question that I'll come back to a few times. What would your family look like if it were more whole? What would your family look like if it were more whole? And what would change if you were more intentional about investing in your family? Whatever that looks like, investing in your family. Some of you have some, even the word invest might not be the right word, but what would change if you were more intentional with regard to your family? And so that's kind of where I'd like to go with this. And I want to suggest something. The first question is really heavy if you think about it. What would your family look like if it were more whole? If you're like me, the real answer to that question, I feel a sense, and in certain moments, especially in these seasons, I feel an approach avoidance to it, if I'm honest with you, because for a variety of possibilities. One possibility is it's just it may or may not be that way, and so it's hard to approach something. It's like I have this aspiration to this possibility of what wholeness would look like that I've never really seen fully come to fruition, or the real conversations that would get me there are too difficult to approach, if you know what I mean. So I think just putting it out there and saying like, this is difficult to kind of approach. And so I'm hoping that we feel invited to approach it. That it may or may not have been that way for a long time. Like we've tried and tried. Some of us we've been married for a couple of decades, some of us, or even if it, just a few years, like in those kinds of, if you are raising kids with a spouse, or with another person, you've been in a relationship for a long time where you maybe haven't seen certain things change. Or in some sense, you feel responsible for the lack of wholeness. And so we fail to approach it because we feel that. And so there's like this sense of shame that keeps us from that. And I hope to invite each of us into some of the harder questions that I've been asking this week as I thought about this, that we sometimes might avoid, even if you've experienced it for a long time. And I also want to suggest this, is that I hope that this is an invitation into what we would describe as your bespoke way of showing up. And bespoke means customized. Like there's a shop down the street from my house called Bespoke, and it's a custom tailor shop. So that there is a part of like the way that we think about what wholeness looks like, and our presentation of that or presence in that is actually probably includes a part of our whole leader development journey, like what it is that we are actually motivated by, what it is that we're good at, which parts to this process of what wholeness looks like in our families would look like. So what the heck is this about? Let me give you a very specific example. On Sunday, Wednesday, I should say, my son graduated from high school. All right. And my second son, yeah, he's going to Point Loma Nazarene University. So he's off to college. He's going to go to San Diego. It's first son leaving. I have two sons. And when he graduated, so I'm sitting there in graduation at T-Mobile Field, big stadium, right? And I got a new watch. All right. And so this is my Apple Watch. Never had one before. I mostly wanted it for the health part, like what's going on with my heart. But then I'm also like, trying to figure out how to deal with this thing how to shut it off when it's sending me text. Well, I get a text from someone whose face you can see right now during the ceremony. And by the way, I'm not blaming him. This is not his problem. His name might be like for short Dan. Let's just say it's Dan. All right. And so I get this text and I see my watch goes and I'm like peeking down, and there it is. And it's Daniel Halleck. Okay. So now I have a choice to make. So I'm sitting there at my son's high school graduation, the only high school graduation he will ever have. Right. And before some of you judge me, all right, for the fact that I even looked at my watch that I don't know how to work. Here's the other thing is that I'm in the part of the ceremony where there's like 300 names being read that I don't know. So a little bit of grace, right, in this moment, right? So, but anyway, I literally had a choice to make because there is this moment, but there's also a lot of other stuff going on. Let me just tell you about what my week was to make this a little personal. Some of you could put your own mapping onto this. Here's what's happening right in this moment. I'm trying to get my truck back from the dealership because I got an $8,000 estimate on what it was going to cost to fix the turbocharger on my truck. So I'm panicked because I need it back to move my other son out of the dorm tomorrow. All right. So that's going on. So I'm trying to figure out, do I respond to that email? And if I don't give them the VIN number, I'm not able to get it. It's a whole longer story, but it was like $8,000 for, a repair. Come on. Okay. The second thing is this. I'm just reading my list. I have two deadlines. One for the most significant grant proposal we have ever submitted for the WiLD Foundation, which was due this week. And the second one was for a TEDx where I'm in the second round of this process and I'm hoping to get it. So we had to produce a video. So that's a work thing I'm facing that was in this moment. My parents' umbrella off their patio just flew off their patio, their second floor patio. A windstorm came up. My parents are 90 and 92. This happened that same day. It lifted the entire table off the patio and crashed onto the ground below. All right. I'm just saying, right? This is life, right? So all these things are happening. I'm sitting at graduation. And I tell you all that because whole and intentional families are complex, right? And it involves moments that are like that. And I would say without intention, we probably wouldn't do any of it well. And so that's kind of this invitation into that. And I think that what's been interesting in our work at WiLD Leaders is we've experienced this in all kinds of different ways. Like I've worked with in the past with generations of family-owned business, some of those companies that 4 generations of family, 40 family members owning a business together. Some of our work in Leading Under Pressure was based in family systems theory. The purposeful goals assessment that's part of the toolkit actually has you identify the purpose behind your family. Every time we coach a leader, by the way, this is what an executive who's kind of saying like, well, I really would love to do whole intentional leader development in my organization. Would you coach me first? I'd love to see how it works and do that. And so then the first thing that they'll ask is maybe, so this is going to be about my family and something personal? Like they're kind of scared of it. Like, is that going to be this? And then we're like, maybe. And then what happens when you start coaching him is it's hard to get him back to the business. You know what I mean? Because so much emerges on this other sides of life that are related to that. So it comes up all the time. And I think one of the things I want to ask you also is this, because I think this is a reality we face, is if you saw yourself as a leader in your family, as someone who is going first, who is responsible for the growth and development of other people, and maybe you're leading with someone else in that space. If you saw if you saw yourself as a leader in your family, what would change? I think it's interesting to think about the concept of what our whole work in whole leader development looks like within that context. Like, how would it change if we saw ourselves that way? And we deal with managers all the time who say like, they've been managing for years and they're like, I never thought of the reality that I might be a leader and responsible for other people. And so I think it's interesting to think about that as well. When it comes to whole and intentional families, let me define a couple of terms before we get out and talk about this. One is that we talked about whole. And I want to suggest to you that I said this before, that while there may be ideal versions of families, the reality is that we are working through our own, it's between that fragmentation and the wholeness we aspire to. So that there's something important going on in the midst of that space between this kind of something different from whole and whole that's important to pay attention to. And we always suggest that the questions that are difficult to approach are really important in that space. The questions that are hard to ask, the questions that are hard to ask with someone you're raising kids with, the questions that are hard to approach with your children because you've never done that before, or with close family members or caring for aging parents, that those questions are important. And that this is the thing I aspire to, is that whole isn't a place we arrive at, but an aspiration we move toward. I cannot say that enough to myself. And I hope that whole is not a place we arrive at, but an aspiration we move toward. And I've said this before as an example. The US Constitution, I spent a lot of time in India. India has its own constitution. And I'm always blown away. If you look at the two constitutions of these two countries, they actually look very similar. And what is so powerful about those documents is that they are aspirational documents. And if you evaluate an aspirational document as what is either happening or not, and say it's good, the document is good or bad based on whether it's happening or not, you miss the reality of the importance of the aspiration. Do you hear what I'm saying? Like we have to have aspirations towards something that we will not fully realize. It's something that it's so important, I think, for us to pay attention to. Now, the second thing is this. So if wholeness is this thing we aspire to, is the concept of intention. So what is intention? Listen to this. The definition of intention is a thing intended. Oh, that's rocket science, right, Joanne? That's rocket science. But listen to this. The second part, it's an aim or a plan. An intention is an aim or a plan. That's really interesting. And intentional is an extension of that, because an intentional is about a choice on purpose. So making a choice as opposed to defaulting and doing nothing. And here's the rub. Here's what's interesting about that word, that it's an aim or a plan. When we work with leaders, one of the things, we work with a lot of leaders who are very highly conscientious. Not all of you are. Some of you are like selectively conscientious like me. All right. But we deal with a lot of leaders who are highly conscientious. So here's the rub with that concept of intention as an aim or a plan. I can tell you right now that for many highly conscientious individuals, a statement of intent is a promise and not an aim. Highly conscientious people sometimes will feel like, if I approach a conversation around an aim, something that we're shooting toward, something that we're aspiring to, that's making a promise to you, person. And that feels very, very heavy for them. And so I think realizing that we come at these things very differently. And I can tell you, my wife and I have had conversations about that, and even in terms of the language that we use as we parent together. And what's interesting is it causes some people to avoid intent. Do you hear me? Like setting out a plan with an aim, because if I do that, I'm promising I will do this perfectly. And we won't. And so that invitation is so important. And some people struggle to make a plan, but even though they're willing to state intentions, and it's interesting personality wise, those people that are really open to experience, like, I'm fine stating an intention, but I have difficulty actually putting a workable plan in place. And then we're asked to lead families together, and that gets tricky. So I just would suggest that it's very interesting. So what would a family, so here's Rob's take. Oh, here's some things that I aspire to for myself. I'm going to give you 5 things really quickly. What would your family look like if it were more whole? And what would change if you were more intentional about investing in your family? So my dad taught me to alliterate. So I have 5 P's. Here we go. Ready, Jim Gobelbecker? Here we go. All right, here's my 5 P's. The first one is a people. In other words, I think intention requires us to identify our family. I've written it down. You want to know who my family is? This is just, if I miss anybody, I'm sorry. I hope no family members are here. Looks like this. I have parents who are 90, 92, celebrated their 71st wedding anniversary the other day. I have a wife of 23 years. I have 2 sons. They are 18 and 19. I have an older brother and 2 older sisters. I have 10 nieces and nephews with their own children. I have 1 aunt on my side and a few cousins and uncles and aunts on Jackie's side. I have a dog named Oakley, who's the most awesome black lab you've ever met. I have a mother-in-law who is in assisted care facility, and my father-in-law passed away 3 years ago. I have a community of families, about 5 families that I have raised my sons with. And that tells me something about what comes next. All right. So I think defining who is your family is, you got to start there, because then it tells me what choices do I have to make. The second thing is a purpose. What's your purpose related to your family? We know that purpose is important from our research on how we show up under pressure, but we also know that it's important for documenting intent. And this is where the purposeful goals assessment, I literally have in front of me. This is my documented purpose related to my family I just described to you. And I can't serve all those people I just described to you. So making some choices about how I'm going to show up. And I have very specific things. I'm not good at this, y'all. That's why I created the WiLD Toolkit. Anyway, like, it's more about me, right? Just trying to make me do this better. No, but I hope it helps some of you. The third thing is a presence. Thinking about how you would like to show up and the unique contribution that you bring. What does Tim Wenzel bring that is unique to his family? In terms of the way he shows up, the way he defines intent, what intent looks like for him that may be different from other people he leads with in his family. The fourth thing is a plan, a statement of intent about what you would like to do or be. A statement of intent, an aim. What would your statement of intent look like? And then finally a perspective as I finish. Here's the thing with families. I think it's true of everything we do, by the way, but it's so salient with families. A step back to see our presence in our family and our purpose and our intent in our family as a long haul, probably the longest haul over our lives. Even if you don't talk to your family members, they're in the back of your mind. You know what I mean? For 20 years, it's a long haul. So I finished with this. I told you that Ryan graduated from high school. He's headed to Point Loma Nazarene University. I keep saying it because I'm excited. I got the t-shirt. All right. And I got a note from a guy. I put it on Facebook and on Instagram. I got a note from a guy named Ben Coleman saying, no way, Ryan's coming to Point Loma. I'm at Point Loma. Let me tell you who Ben Coleman is. He was an undergraduate student of mine 15 years ago. He's now, he's a twin with his brother. And they babysat my sons. Like, pay attention, McKenna, like, to what's happening here. And I remember that the weirdest, because we had all these amazing babysitters, and Ben babysat my sons. And Aiden, before he would go to sleep at night, he always would say, scratch my back. He'd always look at you and go, scratch my back. And Ben told us after he babysat the first time, he goes, yeah, it was awesome. We had a great time. And he goes, then Aiden, when it was bedtime, he goes, scratch my back to Ben. But I just tell you that story because it's like paying attention to these moments. And then Ben Coleman coming to me and saying, I am the director. I think he's the director of clinical training. Like, this guy was a he's now in a graduate program at the university where my son's going to be. I tell you that because it's just these long play kinds of things related to family. If you could imagine what the connections it will make. So let's get out and talk about this. I don't know what this spurred on for you, but something is important to pay attention to.
I love it.